Hello, and welcome to the Alliance Wealth Advisor podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cadaro. For our latest episode, we sat down with President and Chief Innovation Officer, Dr. Jill Murray, and Provost, Dr. Barone Pricci of Lackawanna College. Lackawanna is a premier private college serving the people of Northeastern Pennsylvania. However, the school is focused on taking a different approach to education, and last year was included in Fast Company's list of the world's most innovative companies for its Level Up program, which we talk about in this episode. Lackawanna puts a strong focus on keeping higher education affordable and accessible to anyone in our immediate community. We discuss the evolution of Lackawanna in recent years and why it views itself as a disruptor in the higher education space. Jill and Erica explain why the college's mission is to educate students not only to be prepared for their professions upon graduation, but also to be well-rounded citizens who are stakeholders in their community. They also tell the stories behind their own unique career paths, how they think about team building, and why having a strong culture is essential to any successful organization. This past semester, I joined Lackawanna as an adjunct professor. For me, it was a way to spend time doing something I'm passionate about, which is improving financial literacy and providing investor education to more people. One of the core tenets of our firm is providing people with tools to make better decisions in a complex financial world. And I was excited to be able to do this in the classroom for the first time. Lackawanna was a natural fit given the school's mission. In this conversation, we discussed why financial literacy isn't taught more effectively within the education system, how they approach decision-making in their own lives, and why education must shift to being viewed as an ongoing pursuit rather than a short-term goal in today's economy. I also asked Jill and Erica what the future will look like for higher education in the years to come and what role Lackawanna will play in it. It was an incredible conversation that highlights a great institution helping to make our region better in so many ways. Thanks again to Jill and Erica for a great discussion, and we hope that you enjoy this episode. All right, so Jill and Erica, thanks very much for being here. Welcome to the Alliance Wealth Advisors podcast.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really excited about our conversation today. There's a lot I want to talk about, so I'll try to keep this in some order. But I think first and foremost, thank you for letting me join your team this semester. I have really enjoyed, being in the classroom, which is something new and different for me and got me out of my comfort zone. That's for sure. So I've enjoyed getting involved, and I think, that certainly led to this idea to have you both on today. So thank you.
Thanks for being here, joining our team. You're like legendary, Michael. Right? These kids love you.
And our faculty,
and our faculty also love you, which is also unusual.
Yes, you jumped into the team really well and quickly, Michael.
That you have a consensus opinion of, and effectiveness is quite an interesting dynamic.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So when I talk to people on this podcast, it has generally been geared towards business owners, for a lot of different reasons. But what we want to do in these conversations is always to understand how they made decisions, particularly, at major inflection points in their careers. And I think what was so exciting when we had a conversation about having you on here is that doesn't just apply to business owners. And, that's certainly the case for each of you and many of the people I'd say at Lackawanna, which is taking this entrepreneurial approach and bringing it to, a different area in the education space. So if you don't mind, I was thinking maybe we could start with your careers, how you got here to where you are today. We can go from there. So Erica, I know we've known each other for a little while now, and I know how passionate you are about education. You've really been in education since the beginning of your career, I believe. So how did you know this was the path, and how did that kind of evolve for you over time?
Well, to be honest, I didn't know what my path was. When I first graduated from college, I took a job with my master's degree, the first job that was available to me, which happened to be at my alma mater, which was Marywood. And I met our former president, Mark Volk, and I was 23 years old. And meeting Mark Volk at 23 was probably the defining point of my career.
Wow.
I came to Lackawanna to have lunch with him, and I fell in love with the place. I saw students. I saw these amazing young men and women. I saw our faculty, and I said, Mark, what will it take for me to join your team? So I joined his team very young, 24, I think, at that point, and then had progressive responsibilities in academic administration. And it is truly that Lackawanna has become a vocation for me. I hope to retire from Lackawanna. I want to spend my entire career here. What I see this college doing for our region gets me excited every single day to come to work.
Yeah. Even just sort of watching you speak about it, it's very clear that it's not necessarily a job for you. Was that fair to say?
Absolutely. It's truly a vocation for me.
What is it? And maybe going back to that 23-year-old Erica and having that light bulb go off, what was it, or what were the things that led to that happening? Because I think for a lot of listeners, particular people, early on in the career, they're looking for that and are confused when it doesn't go off right away. But you were lucky enough to have it, right out of the gates.
Yeah. For me, it was, I know myself, and I know that I need to feel like I'm making a difference. I need to have autonomy, and I need to feel like I can be entrepreneurial, even though I hardly have any business credits. At this point now, I have 4.5 business credits under my belt. I'm working on an MBA right now. But I realized that I can't come into work every day and do the same thing for 8 hours.
Right.
I need to feel like I'm making a difference and I'm making changes. And Lackawanna gave me that opportunity. The mission for me is the most important piece of coming to work. I could never come to work all day if I didn't see the impact of what I was doing to change lives. I know it sounds corny, but you know it from meeting our students already after
Sure.
a few short months. Lackawanna is life-changing for the students who come to us. And the ability to impact that every day is what made the light bulb go off for me. Like, wow, I could really do something here.
And that, like you said, the cliche probably doesn't feel like a real thing. And then when you saw the opportunity, say, oh, wait a minute, this is actually something I can do. That was what sort of triggered it.
Absolutely.
And what is your role today?
Today, I'm the provost of the college, which means that I work for Jill as a member of her cabinet, and I supervise all of our academic, student affairs, and not business operations of the college.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I've been pronouncing that wrong for the last few months, so I'm glad you said it out loud, not me. So Jill, I think I would love for our audience to hear about your professional journey. I think just like Erica's, there's a lot people can take away from it. And it's obviously, quite unique in terms of the path you took to get to where you are today.
Yeah, my path is definitely strange, I think, to by most academic standards, by college president standards. I, like Erica, really didn't quite know what I wanted to do coming out of my master's degree in philosophy. And like all good philosophers, we go to work for UPS and we become a Teamster and we drive a UPS truck. And as strange as that may sound, is actually an incredible experience for me. Really wonderful experience. Probably the most formative experience I had professionally up to this point, I think.
Wow.
Well, it teaches you so much. I mean, it really does. I had never had really experience in business, commerce, operations up until that point. So it was an eye-opening experience for me. And it was life-changing as well, because, operations is a really different way to think about life. And it's a different way to think about the world. There's pressure and time and standards and performance and things that as a philosophy major, that really never came into play. I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
So I was a UPS driver for a number of years, and then I went into operations management there, which was phenomenal, great experience. But it is a 24/7 job. I mean, the amount of packages and freight that UPS carries is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest companies in the world, and it's a for-profit, Fortune 100 company. It's a great place to be, but it's a really intense place. And I was able to leave there and go to Cigna Healthcare, where I had operations management opportunities as well. I have multi-site responsibilities, Bristol, Connecticut, and here, and experience in Chattanooga and Bourbonnais, Illinois, all that kind of good stuff. And then I went to Marywood University to both finish my doctorate there and run an institute. And while I was running that institute, I got asked to teach a class in the doctoral program. Once I finished, it was a course in social and economic dimensions of human development, I think. And sitting in front of me was the connective tissue of Mark Bulk and Erica Pricci in my class.
Wow.
So, Mark, after the class was over, said, I think I need somebody to be our academic vice president. Can you come over and talk to me about that? And I was like, me? A couple of years ago, I was driving a truck, And he said, yeah, I like you. I think you'd like Lackawanna. I think you'd like the way that we apply knowledge and how we want to think about education going forward.
Right.
And so I went over and I talked to him and went before the board. And I was really fortunate enough to be appointed as what Erica is now, as the academic vice president. I wasn't the provost. She undersells what she does today. I was the academic vice president. And then when Mark became president, I became the executive vice president, and then added a little line that said the chief innovation officer with that tag. Then when Mark retired, I became lucky enough to be president of this wonderful college and kept the chief innovation officer title as well.
That is so interesting. So what led you to walk into the UPS in the very beginning to get that first job?
I needed a job. They were hiring.
Yeah.
It was around Christmas time. It was in November, I think, as I recall. That's a long time ago. And they were hiring. And so I worked over that holiday season, and it was a warm, beautiful sort of holiday season. So it wasn't like snow filled and
that helps a little,
freezing cold. Yeah. So I had a false impression of what that would be like going forward. And then they were hiring full-time drivers at the time. And I was lucky enough to be there, kind of right place at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in some ways the decision was made for me, but it was, sometimes you just have to take advantage of an opportunity when it comes your way and see what happens as a result of that.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it as a learning opportunity, every time you get an opportunity, it works. Somehow you learn something from it.
And I think one thing that took me a long time to realize is, like, no matter what it is, the role you find yourself in, you need to do that really well.
Yeah.
And just focus on doing that really well versus how does this get me to the next thing?
Yep.
Or you're going to trip over your own feet.
I always like to say all roads lead to where you are. So whatever phase you are in your life and your development and your professional career, you're there because of the choices you've made, the decisions you've made, and you're there. You're supposed to be there. And from that point forward, learn from it and go from there.
So you had mentioned things you learned along the way in terms of accountability, time management, logistics. My guess is there's a lot of psychology involved in terms of dealing with people who are stressed out or worked up or angry. Is that true?
I think the biggest part of what I learned at UPS was professional relationships and just relationships in general, and how to manage those relationships over the course of time. Right. So different businesses have different cycles and they have different personalities, and people come in and out of an organization. And so as a UPS driver, you have a very important role in their life. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I used to look at it. Very important role in their life. And so their relationship with me is very important, but my relationship with them was even more important. So how to manage that became a very central focus of my life.
Yeah. So as I said, focusing on these types of decisions, a couple of which both of you have already highlighted, whether career, personal, within your roles at the college, how do you make decisions? What type of framework do you use when making a major pivotal decision? And my guess is in each of your roles and for the cabinet, there are no shortage of decisions coming your way each day. So it can get pretty exhausting if you don't have a good framework for it.
It's almost like you're inside our heads when you ask that question, because we can both say the answer and we'll say exactly the same thing.
Really?
Yes. I'll say the first part, you
Go
say
ahead.
the second.
Okay.
What's best for the student?
What's best for the institution?
We
That's how
apply
we
that
start.
framework to every decision that we make. And then we, of course, debate what that means. How do you define best?
Sure.
Best in what context? But we are guided always by the student first, then the institution, then all the other stuff.
So if we don't check the first box and the second box, it's going in the garbage can anyways.
Absolutely.
Which makes,
Every time.
which avoids that decision fatigue.
Mhm.
Okay, no, that doesn't apply. So that's out.
And then from there, I think, Mike, what we do is no one makes decisions alone. In the way that we've structured our leadership team, it is very much a collective effort. So it's each of our collective responsibilities to come with information, with points of view and perspectives. And I wouldn't say we argue, but we certainly debate. We have healthy discussions. I lose a lot, as it should be, right? As it should be. And we have this incredible team around us. And I don't think we act from 100% certainty. I think we act from a 75 to 85% certainty rate, because otherwise you're paralyzed. You can't be 100% certain on anything. And so our decision points are really about how we shape ideas, I call it our pizza dough philosophy, right? We throw something up in the air, everybody sort of touches it and shapes it, and it never comes down in the same way that it went up by design. It's always better with this leadership team's point of view and input. Would you say that's true?
Definitely. And something that I appreciate more and more every day is how differently our leadership team thinks. The importance of not surrounding yourself with people who think just like you.
Yeah.
Our leadership team, every one of us brings a different perspective to the table. And I think that's both maddening and the reason that we're so successful.
Yeah, no, that diversity of thought is so important. And in my own experience, though, particularly in leadership roles, diversity of thought's great. But if the person in charge or the people in charge don't want to listen, or their egos are in the way, diversity of thought is, it's kind of great to say and great little tagline, but it doesn't matter because they're not listening anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
The diverse perspectives that we each bring, I think we all check our egos at the door. We have to, because you need a thick skin to go walk in there. And but it's such a great experience. Like, I enjoy our leadership team meetings. Maybe not everyone on the leadership team would agree with that, but I do enjoy it. It's kind of like the air to me, and here's why: because I know that we have this shared responsibility. Our shoulders are all big, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that ability to be able to kind of, disperse the responsibility to all of us really makes decisions a lot easier. You don't have to wear that and, it be weighed down. You don't have to be weighed down by it, because it really does make you feel more confident, more sure, more secure in the direction that you're taking.
And that there's not a blame game coming if the result isn't what you expect it to be, which is really important too, or else people stop pulling the trigger, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So moving on from that, I think this is an interesting question that I had, and I had it personally before coming on board this semester and moving back home, I think too, which is for people who still view Lackawanna as Lackawanna Junior College, or a commuter school where you get your associate's degree, and it still is those things in some ways, but it is certainly evolved, and I've learned that in a major way these last 6 months. But how would you describe it to the person who still views it that way, or maybe the person who's never even heard of Lackawanna, for people who are out of town?
I wish everyone could come and observe a class, because I would say that our faculty is better than any teaching faculty anywhere. They're not researchers, but they can teach better than Harvard's faculty, I would say. They're here because they have a passion for teaching, And that means they both well understand their field and they're interested in helping each individual student, regardless of how they learn, figure out how to master the content. It's all active learning. You won't find one faculty member in our whole institution that stands in front of a room and lectures for 50 minutes at a clip. It just never happens. So I think the opportunity to come and apply knowledge and figure out how you're going to take what you learn and apply it to your everyday life, that's incredible for college age and high school age students. So I wish people could see education is not the education when we were in college. It's not a place where you can sit 400 people in a lecture hall, take a pencil. That still happens, but it's not working. It's broken.
It's certainly not working. That's a great answer. What about you?
Boy, Lackawanna has evolved quite a bit in the last decade and a half, I think, because our focus has been on teaching. Our focus has been on applied learning and applied knowledge. I was literally with someone yesterday talking about what they have a position at a local college or university, and they said, I'm a lecturer there. And I thought, oh boy, thank God we don't have that title because that's not at all what we do, right? It's not the only thing that we do.
Yeah.
And we've structured and developed, I guess, a method or a model where students come in and they immediately begin to apply learning. So it's in our healthcare fields, in our business fields, in our esports and culinary fields. Our culinary program has a restaurant, so it's open to the public. So our students from the very beginning of their education have to work in the restaurant. They have to cook. They have to do front of the house. They have to do back of the house. They have to do every facet of what that business runs. And so we're trying to do that with cybersecurity and with all of the programs that we have embedded work-like applied learning into almost every major we have. That is, I think, what sets us apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's also this element, when colleges say we only take 1% of the students that apply, I cringe to that. I don't know that exclusivity is always healthy. I think that our virtue and the things that we love is that we're an open enrollment institution that says to anybody who wants an opportunity, come on in.
Yeah.
We'll help you. We got you.
There's a lot of conversation. So you guys, in many ways, I think Lackawanna was ahead of the curve in this approach. But it is becoming more prevalent. Somebody who, I follow a little bit is somebody named Scott Galloway at NYU. And he kind of mocks these universities where you have state funded universities who are proud of how many people they're rejecting year to year. And that is a flawed model. It just has to be a flawed model, right?
And it's to be proud of the rejection is to me just not where education needs to be, right? Some of those, our state schools are using a lot of taxpayer dollars, which is a wonderful thing. And they do a lot of incredible work. But to be proud of the rejection rate, I think is something that I myself would not want to be proud of. We have a different lens and a different way of looking at success and measuring success. And that is anyone who wants to come and anyone who wants an opportunity and wants a shot, come on in.
Yeah.
And that to me is a sign of success.
Yeah. So Erica, I'll ask you this question because I think in many ways you sort of grew up in the school as an adult through this evolution. To use that technology company jargon, would you view Lackawanna as a disruptor in an industry that needs some disrupting?
Absolutely. I think we have been a disruptor since our founding, I think. And most recently today, we are an incredible disruptor. I think our Level Up program, which I'm not sure if you know about that program.
No, I think it's certainly worth visiting for the audience.
That jumps immediately into my head. We, a few years ago, decided that the typical dual enrollment framework, which means that students can earn college credits while they're still in high school, wasn't enough, wasn't working. So we decided to change our dual enrollment relationships to include an opportunity for a high school student to earn either a full associate's degree while they're still in high school,
right,
or a certificate of credits. And these credits transfer. They transfer across the country to big name schools. And students can end up starting as a junior once they graduate from high school. They actually get their diplomas from us at the same time they get their high school diplomas, which is incredible.
Wow.
So what a financial savings. It saves students almost $2 million in tuition since its inception.
That's crazy.
That's a huge disruptor. Our online model, I would say, is also a disruptor. We built an online model that rivals traditional classes in terms of student engagement, which is not typically the case. Online classes tend to be a little less hands-on. Ours are not. They're just as hands-on. So I'd say we're a disruptor in just about everything. When Jill and I sit at some of the higher ed different conferences and summits that we go to, we look at each other sometimes and we feel like we're aliens in the room because we speak a different language.
I'm sure those are very exciting conferences often.
We gave a presentation recently on innovation, and our conception of innovation is not wearable technology and self-driving vehicles. It's little innovations, right? It's innovations in the margins. It's a couple of clicks of the dial here and there, where you, like Level Up is just a pivot from dual enrollment, right? But taking that model and shaping it, throwing it up in the air, and having lots of people sort of help to shape and form it has made us one of the world's most innovative companies. That's what we were named in April of 2021, Fast Company magazine. We're very proud of that because that's what we do.
Yeah.
Right? It's these little innovations that are making a big impact. And that's how we look at that.
Well, it reminds me a lot of investing, and something I've sort of tried to get across to students this semester is just everyone wants the silver bullet, right? They want that $1 million or $1 billion idea, but really, wealth is built through compounding and putting money away, investing it, leaving it alone, not trying to time the market, right? And so that getting 1% better every day, like the Atomic Habits model, sort of is yours as well. Is that a fair way to put it?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So I think in listening to your stories, it is clear, I think, that each of you sort of embodies this idea of what Lackawanna is about, the supplied learning, improving, taking a different path maybe than the traditional one. I don't think there's enough of that in higher education. I think that's probably the biggest understatement I can make. Can you talk, though, about how your experiences have helped shape this mission you're on, and shaped the way the college has moved directionally lately?
I'll start. I think, as we've evolved over the past decade or so, what became really clear to us, and again, it's just the clicks of the dial, right? We've always been focused on students and communities and families. We just really formed a way to think about that in a lens through which we view the world now, which is that Lackawanna needs to have a social and economic impact locally, regionally, and to the extent that we can nationally, right? We're about taking people who want an opportunity and move them through whatever paces we need to move them through to get with them where they need to be, whether that's moving them from one socioeconomic class to another, from one job to another, from one opportunity to another. But those movements have an impact in the community as well. So we are primarily a commuter school, although we have about 300 or so resident students. We know that our students that are coming to us are going to stay here. They're going to live here. They're going to work here. They're going to buy houses. They're going to buy cars. They're going to shop in our stores and eat in our restaurants.
Yeah. And
that we need to help make them good citizens as much as we need to make them good nurses or good accountants, right? And that means something to us. And so that mission fit, or that mission tie to the community has become kind of a mantra for us.
That was an amazing answer.
It really was. So I'll plug kind of something I'm passionate about and what led me to meeting and speaking with both of you, which is investor education, financial literacy more broadly. April actually was financial literacy month. And that's the reason I wanted to teach. I think in my experience in education, all the way through a master's degree, there were so many people I went to school with and learned from, who taught classes who, they were so smart, but didn't have any background in how to make decisions with money. They didn't understand how the stock market worked. They didn't, and not that everybody needs to know as much as, somebody who does it for a living does, but just having that framework to make decisions, that needs to apply, like you said, regardless if you're an accountant, regardless if you're a nurse, construction worker, teacher, right? Why don't schools and higher ed in general teach this? Or why do they struggle so much to teach it? You see it a little bit in the news here and there, it pops up, but it's clearly there is a deficit of that right now, particularly I think with younger people who've taken on a lot of debt and don't understand some of these things.
That's a fascinating question. I think that traditionally higher ed this will sound crazy coming from someone who built a career in higher ed, but it's not a practical enterprise. We'd much rather traditionally teach you to read a philosopher or teach you about a war and think magically that you will apply the concepts you learned that are really important to these everyday financial decisions. And that I don't mean to in any way devalue the traditional, liberal arts education or the traditional vocational education. They're amazing, but financial literacy fits in both, but fits nowhere in our curriculum.
Yeah.
So I think, and even for us, we put financial literacy into a college 101 class with everything else but the kitchen sink, and it's great, but it's not enough. It needs to be, like you said, woven into classes that are more meaningful to students. So I'm excited to continue this conversation offline for how we can incorporate these real life competencies into not just a freshman experience or not just a graduation seminar.
Yeah, agreed. Same here. Any thoughts, Jill?
Yeah, I think Erica's right. We're not, education isn't built that way. There's a professor at Lackawanna, Kevin McDonough, who used to say, we have the Center for Teaching and Learning. And so we rotate every single faculty member that we have that's new through the Center for Teaching and Learning to teach people who know their discipline, but may not know how to teach, right? So we rotate them through that. And he does this great sort of metaphor that says, the old professor be the person in front of the room with this mat, like this table full of stuff that has a tablecloth over it. And a little bit, every time they teach a class, you pull back a little bit more and you reveal knowledge rather than how to apply knowledge. And by the end of the semester, the tablecloth is off and you see all these magical things on this table, this knowledge, right? But no one teaches you how to apply it. And financial literacy is about application of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's about how you live and choices you make and decisions you have in front of you. And that's where we've taken, I think, education has been, we're not going to reveal knowledge. We're going to teach you knowledge and then how to apply it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I love that. I absolutely love that analogy. But it also it has become less even so that was never a great model maybe for many professions and in many ways. It's becoming even worse over time because the problem today isn't that we don't have access to the information. Everyone has the information. We all have computers in our pockets that 40 years ago we couldn't even imagine, right? So the information is less valuable than it used to be in that model to begin with. So it's actually not even static. It's getting worse. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that? Because it's just my thought in listening to you.
I absolutely think it's worse. And Erica can probably speak to this better than I can. We have answers in our pockets, right? We have the surface, 1 + 1 = 2. We don't teach students always how to go deeper, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? And how do we take that and be able to use it? If I'm watching something on cooking or culinary, how do I apply that to business? If I'm watching something, in an operating room, how do I apply that to my learning in my life? Like what are the things that I can take and go a little bit deeper than just getting an answer?
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. I think education has started to change and will continue to change. What is the point of memorization anymore when you have the answer in your pocket?
It's like just wasted.
Why bother?
Space.
You better use that time to figure out how to solve a problem instead of memorizing the elements of the periodic table. Who cares?
It's available to me.
Right.
Yeah.
In my pocket.
I think so switching gears a little bit, and Jill mentioned this. It was something I had written down from one of our conversations. And this was this idea she had mentioned about you cannot lead alone. So being that you're a member of Jill's team, you've been there for a long period of time, so you've seen this evolution. And I think even just the fact that both of you are here shows that you walk the walk, and this isn't just lingo you like to say, and it sounds great. But what is your philosophy and your team's philosophy on not only team building, but putting people in a place to succeed? Off the top of the show, you had mentioned like you wanted autonomy, like you wanted the ability to go and make decisions and probably fail and learn. So is that a part of the team building philosophy? And how do you think about it?
Absolutely. That it's autonomy, but with support. We have this analogy at Lackawanna where we'll say we'll put someone in a fishbowl, which means that we give them a safe environment to try out a project, knowing we're really right here.
Yeah.
If they need some guidance, we're always asking, what have you learned? What's not going well? So I think autonomy is really important, but the other half of that is someone to really support you. I tell all of my team members, whatever decision you make, even if it was the wrong one, I'm with you. I trust you. You're in this role because I believe you can do this job. If you make a mistake, we're making it together. We don't work in ICU. And we'll figure it out. And that's been so important to give people the freedom to fail and the freedom to speak freely to each other. I think it's so important to be able to say to your colleague, this is just not working well.
Yeah.
We need to go back to the drawing board here. So I think trust is a huge underpinning of all of this. So trust, autonomy, and support, if I had to.
Yeah. And I think too, like the trust piece is really important today because people could be walking on eggshells in the wrong culture and the wrong environment, right? Where they're afraid to speak up to somebody who maybe is ahead of them in the hierarchy or, has a bad temper. So that, that's not a small or an easy thing to create that trust, I would guess, right?
Yes. And we are very lucky that Lackawanna has had that culture for a very long time. Our leadership style at the college has always been a door open. We've had a family atmosphere for a long time. So I think Jill and I both inherited a culture where when you're walking down the hallway, the facilities director's opinion is just as important as the custodian's opinion. Like there is no hierarchy.
Yeah.
Communication.
That flat structure is important. So on that note, one thing that I think that drew me to Lackawanna personally and led me to reach out to you, actually, I had sent you an email a while back, was the op-ed that Jill wrote. And Jill highlighted all the great things happening in the area. And what I loved about the op-ed is like, it was unapologetic. It was optimistic, and it was blunt. And I think usually when you read those types of things, there's fluff. And you're not even sure what they said a few paragraphs in, and there was no mincing words, which is what really, it made me reread it. So, the headline to it was, we need to erase the areas in inferiority complex. And I want to talk about that here today. First of all, that mindset, why it exists and how we shift it. And I've talked to a lot of guests about it, but two, Lackawanna's role in collaborating with other leaders in the area is kind of the second part of the question. How do you think about that, and why is it so important, and why isn't it done more often? So that's a loaded question, but let's start with maybe the region and that, the to use the term in the headline, the inferiority complex, and how to change it.
I wrote that op-ed, if you recall, because I was so mad at that particular moment. And I said to Eric, I got to write an op-ed about this, because people were apologizing for Scranton, almost like apologizing for being in Northeastern Pennsylvania. And it's as a default option, if student wanted to go to a particular college or university they didn't get into and they ended up staying home, it was the default option. And I was so taken aback by that, not because I hadn't heard it before, I heard it all my life, but because I thought we were in a different place. I know we're in a different place, and that this city in this region in Northeastern Pennsylvania means something. It means something to the country. It means something to the people that live in it. It means something to all of us that support it and participate. We can't be thinking that this is a default option. We have to make things happen here, and I think we are. And I think you're seeing a lot of businesses start to think about the region differently and how we participate both from a business perspective with education and education with industry and with governments, and really trying to clear out the weeds and the bureaucracy that exists to make you not be able to make progress.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made me write the op-ed, was just this mindset for people in the region that says, well, it's, I guess I had to stay here. No, choose to stay here. It's a great place to be. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to work and be educated and raise a family, right? That's what we're about.
Yeah.
And that's what we believe. And so that's what made me write that op-ed.
So Erica, how do you think about the collaboration piece? Because there's no shortage of that in what you've done so far, and many of the things I've learned about, all of the great things happening at, everything from culinary, but all the way to like these cutting edge industries that don't even really exist yet.
I think one of the ways that Lackawanna has changed most in the last decade is how deeply we prioritize our partnerships with the regional community. We exist to propel graduates to serve the community as citizens and as employees. So we never want a curriculum that doesn't match what our regional employers want.
Makes sense. Yeah.
That sounds like such a novel idea.
Right.
But higher ed typically doesn't ask the workforce, what do you guys need? Where are graduates falling short? So it sounds so simple, but we're doing that every day now. The problems in our community, like hunger, for example, it's just too big for one entity to handle alone.
Yeah.
So we're developing programs. We have this amazing program right now where our culinary students and our honor students are making meals that our public safety officers are delivering to Scranton School District's neediest families. Those are small partnerships, but boy, are they life-changing for the students and the families. So we're doing that every day.
The other part, though, that's hard, and this may be a higher ed problem, but it's certainly just a people problem too, where it's like everyone needs a sandbox, right? So it's hard to collaborate when somebody needs the credit or somebody needs the control. How do you navigate that?
Gosh, that's a good question too. And I will sound like Pollyanna when I say this. I think we are successful because we don't look at it that way. We'll give our partners all the credit. We'll trust that good things will come back to us because of the role that we played.
Yeah.
And it's happened that way. So we approach our partnerships with school districts and with other colleges saying, how do we make this work for you? We want to be a great partner. How can we be your best partner? And that has worked over and over and over again. And I think we have gotten the reputation of being a really good partner because, as Jill said a bit ago, we always check our egos at the door. Mm-hmm. I think Jill and I both have a little bit of an inferiority complex. We tend to think we're not quite right, and we take that approach with everyone that we deal with.
What I view it as from an investment perspective and sort of my lens is it's leading with value versus being transactional, and I think that always pays off over the long run. Mm-hmm. Whereas, if you look at it from an investment perspective or however you want to look at it, if you're focused so much on that one-time transaction, you're not going to have good repeatable outcomes.
I don't think we could agree more on that. I think everyone sort of says college is an investment. I don't know that people they think about the singular outcome, the job at the end, or the career that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And while I think that's incredibly important and no one should lose sight of that, discovering what that needs to be and how that always, how that plays out in your life is equally as important. The process is as important as the outcome for us always.
Yeah.
And so we take very seriously that people look at us and weigh the options of where to go, because we are an investment, right? We're a very, very significant investment in people's and families' lives. We take that seriously. And so we think that you should be getting a return on investment all throughout your experience, not just at the end.
Do you think more people in your roles in higher education should take that approach?
Yes.
Most definitely.
I wasn't sure if I should ask that or not.
and I think some are. I think some colleges and universities and some leaders are starting to realize that. I think they're starting to understand that the consumer is demanding much more than just a singular outcome. And that, as we're seeing some of these crisis moments in higher ed, both with mental health and some of these other crisis points that we're seeing, that there needs to be steps along the way that where you're measuring success and support and help and successful outcomes, not just at the end. And I think some colleges and universities are starting to do that now. Would you agree?
I definitely agree.
So you had, there are so many initiatives. You had spoken about Level Up, which I think may be one of the best ideas I've ever heard, particularly, in education, but in general, right? I think that's just such a great program. The culinary piece. There's robotics. There's partnerships related to autonomous driving down the road, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. We want to talk about financial education, and I'm banging my fist on the table for that. How do you balance, when you're mission driven, like the college is, how do you balance all of these great things that you can do, feeding hungry children, right? At some point, you have to be able to say no, or else you're trying to do too many things at once and you don't do any of it as well as you could, maybe. Now, how do you balance those two things in a leadership role?
We have to listen to our leadership teams. My team members will come to me and say, hey, too much, back up, can't do this. And so I think, again, going back to that culture of trust.
Yeah.
And I think also being really practical. There are some of the projects that we're doing that just don't require a whole lot of time and energy. Those are easy ones. So I think we've been putting projects into buckets. So when we start a new degree program, that's a huge lift for us. That's a big undertaking. We can only do one or so of those at a time. Mm-hmm. But if we're expanding a cohort size, if we're doing something that's making some course revisions, those are much smaller projects. So we have to have a project plan and be really organized and intentional about what happens alongside of what and what might need to wait until 2025, for example.
Yeah.
And those are tough challenges and waters that we have to navigate. I think because our responsibility as an institution is to say yes. It's not to say no. Our responsibility is to help the community. It is to give people an opportunity where you can invest dollars to get, a cutting edge education in robotics and electric vehicles and cybersecurity. And, when we have our Center for Homeland Security Excellence in cybersecurity, as well as accounting, as well as culinary, it's our responsibility to say yes. We need to figure out, sometimes the timing is wrong. Sometimes the project doesn't fit. That doesn't mean it never comes back to the table. So there's kind of this boomerang effect. Sometimes you just got to throw it out there for a while, and somehow it finds its way back to us at the right moment. So do we say no a lot? Yeah, we do. But we never say no always.
Yeah, it's more not right now rather than a hard no.
And I think a lot of institutions take we can only focus on one thing at a time. Well, then life's going to pass you by, right?
Yeah, good luck.
You need big shoulders. You need to be able to carry and heavy lift lots of things at the same time. That doesn't mean you should overburden your staff. And that's why we have this great leadership team and people inside the organization who trust us enough to say, not now, as Erica said, not yet. Let's wait a little bit. Or it could be better if we did this first. So I think, from our perspective, the default answer is yes, it's not no.
Yeah.
We just need to figure out when, where, and how.
And the sort of ongoing process rather than we need to start here and go all the way here by, next year, but rather we're going to tweak this. We're going to make it better over time. It makes it more manageable. And it, for our clients where I think people think when you're financial planning, you're going to give them 100-page document and they have to follow this budget and they have to do, and it's really like, you just got to start, why don't we start here? Right. We can do this today and then let's see where we're at.
Yeah.
And, you can build off it versus like this overwhelming anxiety you create with these huge projects.
I think development of staff, as Erica talked a little bit about before, is so critical for us, developing leaders and giving them, changing their perspective. You said it to me when we were talking a couple of weeks ago. When you're teaching some of our football players who think they're going to the NFL. And instead of saying, okay, what's your plan B? You take a different approach. You say, oh, great. Well, when you get to the NFL, when you're successful, how are you going to make sure that you stay wealthy and not broke?
Right.
Just taking a different perspective. I think the leadership philosophy for us is the same. Okay. If we need to get here, how do we start little by little making the changes we need to make? If we don't have to get there tomorrow and we can get there in 5 years, how do we do that?
Yeah.
So there's little wins and changing the perspective so that's not overwhelming to people and asking their input and how to design it, how to build it, how to shape it.
We also are very willing to stop doing things that are no longer working. I think a lot of organizations or even people will just keep doing what they did yesterday in addition to the new stuff. Yeah. Exactly. You can't. There's just not enough bandwidth. My brain doesn't have enough space.
We call it project funerals. We often have project funerals.
I like that a lot. I have a couple on my desk that might need a funeral.
Yeah.
So you just said like the 5 or 10 years down the road in terms of like some of these initiatives. So what does higher education look like in 5 or 10 years to you? And where does Lackawanna fit in to that sort of tapestry?
Wow. Higher education 5 or 10 years from now probably looks much more like Lackawanna College does today. Than some of the other colleges that function more traditionally. I think the role of technology in higher education is good. COVID has taught us an awful lot about how technology and education intersect. Right. And I think that everything like Jill discussed about curriculum and applied learning, that's where Lackawanna needs to be. In 100% of our courses, we need to have applied learning and hands-on opportunities.
I think the future of higher education also, while a traditional path will always be there, a student coming out of high school, going right to college, that's always going to be true. As Erica said, I think COVID has taught us an awful lot. That technology changes industries quickly. And so I think the lifelong learning aspect, the going out and coming back in for training, for uptraining, for new degrees, for new certificates is going to become an industry unto itself in a different way than it is today. And I think our job is to communicate that both to our partners and collaborators in industry as well as to our students. That when you leave here, when you leave us, when you graduate with your associate's degree or your bachelor's degree or whatever it is that you're graduating with, that doesn't end your learning. That your professional life needs constant updating.
Yeah.
It needs constant reference to things that are new in the world and technologies that are relevant and recent and that are going to change the way you operate, the way you do your job today. You know this, Mike, I think probably better than any of us. The way you do your job today is not going to be the way you do your job 5 years from now.
Right.
And we all need to be prepared for that. So I think higher education in particular is going to be about partnerships and collaborations with industry to get people trained and retrained and uptrained and continuously coming back and forth, in and out, forever. And
allowing it, we talked about decision making, career paths, pivoting, right?
Right.
You have to provide the tools for people to do that, because that's just going to become more and more common.
And be open to it, right? Not everybody thinks they don't like change. And I think that's absolutely not true, right? People change their wardrobe, they get their hair cut, they buy a different car, they buy houses, they move, they travel, people like different experiences. I think if you look at change differently, rather than it's, this heavy weight that you have to oh my goodness, I need to go back
like they
to
said
square
in
one.
I fear change.
If you think of change as going back to square one, that's not what change is.
Yeah,
change is
that's the scary part.
The scaffold.
Yep.
Right. And so I think, as we look forward, I think to help people navigate change better, not be so intimidated and afraid of it. That's another one of our ways that we can help students and families navigate the world.
And I think this is a whole other podcast, but I think higher education needs to be part of helping the broken K through 12 system nationally fix itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back for that one, because that's a good one. So you have been so gracious with your time. Thank you very much. I do have one more question for both of you. And it's a question I've asked all of my guests so far, and I've received so many great answers. I'm excited to hear both of yours. So, given everything you've experienced, everything you know now, what advice would you give your 22-year-old self?
I would tell my 22-year-old self to spend less time being upset about my mistakes, and just know going into everything, I don't know it all. I have a lot to learn, and forgive myself a little for making mistakes. One of the things that Mark Volk always still tells both of us is, if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing, you're not learning. And I just need to be more respectful of myself as I make mistakes.
That's a really, really good one. One I could certainly, I could take to heart too, I think.
Very similar to Erica. I would tell my 22-year-old self what I tell my 55-year-old self, and that is, be patient. You don't need to know everything today. Success comes in stages and in steps, and it's okay. Things will come as you're a good person and you do the right things and you try to make sure you're inclusive and not exclusive. I think life just has a way of moving you in the right direction, and I think you need to trust that for yourself, and that you don't have to push as hard. It doesn't have to be such a driven experience, because life has so many changes in store for you. So I tell myself what I would tell myself at 22 is what I tell myself today at 55. Relax a little bit.
I think that's a perfect place to end it. Thank you both very much for coming on.
Thank you,
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you.
The information on this podcast was created by Alliance Wealth Advisors and published for informational purposes only. The guest on this episode was not a client at the time of this interview and did not receive any compensation. For more information, please visit alliancewealthadvisors.com.